Welcome to the ICF Women's Symposium. We are here in Lausanne. Before starting, my name is Michel from the International Canoe Federation. Before starting, I will have to explain a little bit of housekeeping points. First of all, we are an international organization. We will be speaking in English, but I would like to tell you that there is a possibility for you to have automatic translation. Let me just show you. So if you go on your Teams, on your computer, on the top of the screen, you will have the three dots. You can go to language and speech and then show the live caption or subtitle. And then on the bottom right, you can choose which language. So there is a long list of language, so you can do it in many languages, and then you can keep the sound in English as we speak and have the subtitle in any of the language available. So we hope this will help you following this symposium. Before introducing all the speakers by the name of the speaker of today, I would like to tell you what's gonna come today. So today's symposium will be split in two sessions. The first session, we will begin with several opening remarks, followed by a presentation on safe sports, how to identify ethical misconduct, what is the responsibility of institution, and there will be an opportunity for a question and answer. Then that should take around 1 hour to 1 hour and a half. Then there will be a break of 10-15 minutes. The second session will restart with a focus on women's perspective, how the decision-making dynamics take place, what is the institutional accountability, and how to build more resilient sports organization. This will be followed by a panel session also on this women's perspective, with also opportunity for Q&A session. We should be able to close the overall symposium with two sessions that will last between 1 hour and 1 hour and a half. So overall 3 hour online symposium. And thank you very much for being here. The next point is how to ask questions. We have enabled our chat room. So we will, following the chats on our side here, we have the chat here. So we will follow your question, and we do not allow the microphone to be switched on for keeping the symposium, let's say, under control, but we will read your question in the chat. It's just here on our left. So please don't hesitate to question, and we will try to read and answer your question, of course. Very quickly, I will go through the speaker of today. I will introduce them with more introduction, let's say. But very quickly, we have our ICF president, Mr. Thomas Konietzko, here in the center of the video. Also in the center of the video, ICF vice president, Cecilia Farias, just here. We have International Olympic Committee, IOC, Pedro Diaz, Gender Equality and Inclusion Manager, on the side of the screen. Next to me, Moira Aston, ICF board member. We have Melissa Fisher, which is just outside the screen, but she will come back later. Which is a business leader and women mentor, I would say, women leadership mentor. Remotely, we have two speakers, and that would be our main presenter of today, Claudia Calvin Venero, international relationship specialist and political scientist, as well as Soraya Lida de Carvalho, sports specialist. Okay, that was a quick introduction. Every speaker has been introduced, but he doesn't need introduction. This is our ICF president, Thomas Konietzko. Please, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Michel, and good morning, good afternoon, good evening for a second webinar, and it's a record-breaking webinar. Yesterday, we had almost 300 subscribers on our list, and I'm sure we will have some more today, and I'm happy to see so many familiar faces. Among them, of course, our honorary president, from my position on the left side of our screen, Pachi Jose Perarena, welcome. But first of all, of course, I want to congratulate all our strong female representatives within the ICF community on the occasion of the tomorrow International Women's Day. It's your day, enjoy it tomorrow. And we have, luckily, many strong women in our canoe community who are committed to our sport. Some of them are sitting here next to me on the podium. And I would like to express my special thanks to our Vice President, Dr. Cecilia Farias, for making that important webinar possible. But also I want to express gratitude to Moira, who is joining us, to Melissa, who is joining us, and of course, Claudia and Soraya remotely. And Pedro, as a man who is fighting very hard for gender equality, welcome as well. But why do we still need to discuss gender equality and safeguarding, another topic today? Simply because we want to and must improve in this area. And we want to discuss with you how we can achieve this goal. 2.5 years ago, ICF and Canoeing Ireland successfully organized the first Women's Symposium in Dublin with more than 100 delegates from 35 countries. And one of the reasons why we organized this symposium was to encourage and inspire our national federations and continents to host their own forums and to put this strategic goal, gender equality, on the prominent place it deserves. Oceania followed last year. Thank you to the organizers with the Women's Symposium. And I can only encourage you, your national federations and our continents to follow. It must be and is our shared responsibility and goal to achieve true gender equality in all our activities, from participation in development camps to participation in competitions, in the representation of women at all management levels, and to discuss how we can safeguard our athletes in training, competition, and in our sport environment at their best. And this is why we want to encourage you with our webinar today to get still stronger involved in your local organization. And you can be sure that we as ICF leaders and all the vice presidents, Louis is also present remotely, are here at your side. And however, significant strides have been made in recent years. We have a growing number of female representatives in our national and continental federations. We have more women sharing ICF commissions. We have more female delegates at the ICF Congress, and we have reached full gender balance in the Olympic Games since Tokyo 2021, and the same number of ITOs in almost all of our competitions from both genders, especially in the Olympic Games. But we also know that we have not yet achieved gender equality in all areas. And today we want to hear your ideas, the ideas of our presenters, your proposals on how and where we need to improve as ICF. And I can assure you that the ICF will do everything in its power. And today's symposium is a good example of this, to create the conditions and, if necessary, the rules and platforms to ensure that women's voices are heard, valued, and empowered within our sport. And that our athletes, male and female, find a safe environment in our sport, protected by a strong ICF safeguarding policy. Only then can we make our sport stronger together and can strengthen our global community. And now I think we all are looking forward to our speakers and to Cecilia's introduction. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Thomas.
Thank you, Thomas, for this inspiring opening remark. Let me introduce Cecilia first.
Thank you very much.
So Cecilia Farias, for a few people who may not know her, our vice president, she is a lawyer, specialist in private administration, trailblazer in sport governance. She has served as the first female vice president of the International Canoe Federation following her re-election in 2021 and again in 2024. She continues her historic tenure with mandate extending through 2028. In her capacity of vice president, she chairs the ICF Diversity and Inclusion Commission and spearheads the Sustainable Development Program. She is a dedicated advocate for gender equality, for social inclusion, and environmental responsibility within the global paddle sports. In her career in sports administration, she had several decades of career, of course, and include high-level roles such as the president of COPAC, Pan American Canoe Federation, Secretary General of the Argentinian Canoe Federation, technical sport manager of the national entity of high performance in Argentina, and director of venue in the Youth Olympic Games in Buenos Aires 2018. She is the current internal auditor of the Argentine Olympic Committee and the first president of ACODEPA, the Association Pan American Sports Confederation. All this role, very long resume, that combines with her service to the ICF and the academics as professor of governance and sport management at the Olympic Sport Organization, managing sport organization, MOSO, run by the Argentine Olympic Committee. That is a long resume, Cecilia, a lot of implication everywhere.
Thank you very much, Michel.
Please, the floor is yours.
Thank you, thank you. And thank you to everyone for joining us today. In 2023, Canoeing Ireland and the ICF collaborated to organize the inaugural ICF Women's Symposium. The theme was Change Locally, Change Globally, Change Together. It was an excellent occasion where we exchanged insights and planned future initiatives, including hosting a women's symposium on each continent. In this context, last November, Padel Australia successfully held a women's symposium representing Oceania, and Africa is set to conduct its first women's symposium next September in Algeria. After achieving gender parity at the Olympic Games in Tokyo 2020+1 and in Paris 2024, ICF events must prioritize the inclusion and participation of more women. We are dedicated to ensuring a safe environment and welcoming conditions for engaging in our sport. Promoting gender equality remains crucial to unleash the full potential of both women and men, contributing to sustainable development and to the creation of a more equitable society. Sport has the power of transforming lives, and leaders must take on the responsibility of reforming systems at both local and global levels, ensuring equal representation of genders in competition and leadership roles. Women pursue careers in sport as athletes and roles of coaches, officials, administrators, classifiers, event organizers, and leaders. Still, we sometimes question our influence and the effectiveness of our actions. Gender equality is an essential human right, and today we'll share with our audience the most important concepts regarding safeguarding and contemporary female leadership. We have faced numerous challenges, often constructing our own obstacles through complex systems that fail to work or where we don't operate at our best. Today, our two experts will guide us along a straightforward path regarding safeguarding concepts and helping us to better understand the roles of women and men leaders. And to finalize this introduction, please allow me to say thank you to President Jose Perurena Lopez. Pachi, my dear friend, has been one of my mentors. And it's very important for me to have him there. Of course, the ones that know Pachi know that he is the current president of the World Games. But it's very nice for me, Pachi, that you are there always supporting. And of course, our Vice President, Luis Rabaneda, who is also together with other board members and the public that join us this afternoon in Switzerland and different time zones in the other continents. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Cecilia, for this again inspiring remark. The next speaker I would like to introduce is Pedro Diaz from the International Olympic Committee. Thank you for joining us here in person, actually, on the Saturday. So a very big thank you to you. Let me introduce quickly. So Pedro Diaz is a current Gender Equality and Inclusion Manager at the IOC, but I think more importantly is a former Olympian in judo. So judoka here for Portuguese Olympian judo. He was also a coach and a founder of a sports event company in Brazil, if I'm not wrong. He was also a director of a leading sport NGO in Portugal, securing a lot of European funding. So a successful pathway here as well for the sport. He focused on researching and developing projects promoting gender equality sport after participating in a program in the Finnish Olympic Committee. Is a clearly advocate and champion for the cause. So if I didn't forget anything, the floor is you.
Thank you very much for the introduction. I would like to thank you the opportunity to be here today. It's a privilege to be here in the second Women's Symposium, a very important initiative for the future of the sport. Events like this demonstrate a clear commitment to create safer, more inclusive and equitable sport environments. And the presence of the ICF President Thomas on this event brings a clear message to all. Together, bringing leaders, experts, and athletes helps to move the conversation from awareness to concrete actions. I would like to especially recognize the Vice President Cecilia Farias. She has been a strong ally and a champion on gender equality in sport. Through her leadership within ICF and her work on diversity and inclusion, she continues to inspire progress across globally paddling community. Gender equality, it's not a trend. It's a basic human right. And today, a must for any sport organization if they want to have a sustainable growth. Creating safe and inclusion sport environments, it's not only a responsibility, but a fundamental condition for sport to thrive. Safeguarding leadership opportunities and gender equality must be integrated into governance of sport organizations. Initiatives like this symposium help to ensure that women's voices and perspectives shape the future of sport leadership. The progress we see today is the result of a collective effort and committed leadership. I would like to wish you a great symposium. I'm very happy to see many men on the other side of the screen, because normally when we associate this type of initiatives, we think that, oh, this is a women's issue. No, gender equality, diversity and inclusion is everybody's issue. So I'm very happy to have other allies on the other side of the screen. And we also need to take in consideration something. Gender equality doesn't happen from one day to the other. It's necessary a joint commitment, okay? The IOC is working together with the International Federation, and that's why we are here. The International Federation is doing all their efforts, but we need all of you, national federations, continental federations, associations, clubs, athletes, to be involved. And everybody together, we will manage to achieve our objectives. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Pedro.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Then we can start. We can kick off the webinar with some presentation. And the first presenter will be Soraya. She is remote. She's not with us. If I'm not mistaken, you are in Brazil. So let me introduce you, Soraya. Soraya Lida de Carvalho, who is a safe sports specialist, former Olympian as well, and internationally recognized expert in sport education and safeguarding. Gymnastic athlete, Brazilian gymnastic athlete. She represented her country at the Atlanta 1996 Olympic Game and competed at multiple world championships before moving into the sports leadership. Soraya is a professor and tutor of the Executive Master in Sport Organization Management, MEMOS, which is led by IOC since 2015. She's also a certified IOC safeguarding officer. She served as the manager of the Brazilian Olympic Institute at the Brazilian Olympic Committee, where she led national education program for athletes, coaches, sports manager, and design. She designed and implements NOC Safe Sports program, where this program addresses violence, harassment, abuse, racism, and gender inequality. That's also a very strong expert we have here, Soraya. And with Soraya, we will see and we will discuss the implementation of Safe Sports program. how to identify ethical misconduct, institutional responsibility, and what is this responsibility to create environment free from harassment and abuse. So Soraya, we are looking forward to your presentation. The floor is yours.
Hello. Hello, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here at the second Women's Webinar Symposium to talk a little about safety in sport. I'm very happy to be here with you, and it's an honor for me. And Cecilia, thank you very much for this opportunity. To start, I'm going to share my presentation. Just a minute. Oops. Sorry. Sorry. I have some.
And we can see it, Soraya.
Yes.
Oh, no, it's gone.
No, it's gone.
No.
Now it went away.
Oh my gosh. Sorry. Now it's okay. I
It's
think
good,
it's
yeah.
okay.
Okay,
Good.
yes.
Okay, thank you
Perfect.
very much. Sorry for that. So let's start. We are going to talk about safety in sport, prevention, care, and share responsibility. Today, we are going to talk about safety in sport, and this topic can be difficult for some people. People participating in this webinar may have experienced violence inside or outside of sport. Therefore, I encourage you to keep these suggestions in mind in case anyone feels uncomfortable or distressed. The goal of our webinar is to introduce and raise awareness about safety in sport. We are going to talk about this topic, discuss some cases, and to do so, I'll follow 3 steps in this seminar. I'll talk about the sport context, the data on violence, then we will specifically look at the types of violence and how they manifest themselves in our daily lives in sport. And finally, we will conclude with prevention and response actions. To start with, I'm going to share a video, the IOC video, that's talk a little bit about sport to get us warmed up.
To be a giant. This has forever been our passion, this desire to be a giant. Not to stand on one's shoulders or to have one for a friend, though these may be fortunate things, but to be one. Giants step over barriers that seem never-ending. They conquer mountains that appear insurmountable. Giants rise above fear, triumph over pain, push themselves, and inspire others to be a giant, to do giant things, to take giant steps, to move the world forward.
Sport is something wonderful, isn't it? It's about performance, training, competition, but it's also has to do with education, fair play, respect, values, and friendship. We are here all involved in the world of sports, and we know that sport have been recognized for many years and around the world for their important contribution to the health and well-being of those who practice them. It is in a sport that we learn athletics movement, techniques, and tactics. And it is also in a sport that we learn values for life. We learn to win and to lose, about leadership, overcoming challenges, resilience, respect. So sport has many positive factors, right? But I would like to ask a question, a reflexive one. Does the unique environment of sport bring a high risk of occurrence of violence? Let's talk a little bit about this environment now. Sports, what are its characteristics? What are its elements? So I'm going to start with competition. Competing is an inherent part of a sport. It begins when younger children play at school, running, playing games, and trying to see who is the fastest. And it continues in high performance sport as we know and experience it. Of course, we understand high performance sport is about daily improvement, becoming more precise, faster, more agile, and stronger. However, in this constant pursuit of results, there is a very fine line between what is acceptable and what is not. Of course, it is natural and necessary for coaches to seek the best from each athlete. But how can we define the limits of this pursuit? The intense drive for performance can sometimes lead to the mistaken justification of extreme methods and the neglect of athletes' well-being. So competing is not about win at any cost. The second characteristic of a sport has to do with hierarchy and authority. Sport is highly hierarchical. There are sport organizations, coaches, technical staffs, referees, and many other professionals before we even get to the athletes level. This high degree of hierarchy creates relationships that involve power over athletes, and this environment becomes vulnerable for those on the weaker side of the rope. Let us now move on to the third characteristic related to the precariousness of the environment in which sport is practiced. Well, accepted in large centers of a national and international federation and large clubs, sport itself is mostly practiced in a school and in training center that sometimes do not meet all the necessary conditions. They do not have adequate equipment. There's no trained staff. Many hours are spent with the same people in isolated space, in sport facilities without rules, code of conduct, procedures, or policies. Therefore, in this precarious environment, many things can happen from injuries due to equipment in poor condition, to harassment and abuse due to a lack of rules and supervision. Sport has many particularities. For example, in a sport, the athlete's body needs to be touched. It will be touched by the coach, the doctor, the physiotherapist, right? In addition, there are changing rooms and showers There are trips, accommodation for training, competitions, camps, travel, transportation home, often with vulnerable populations such as children and adolescents. So imagining all these particularities in a precarious environment, which does not have protection policies and procedures, which has no supervision. An environment where I can touch the athlete's body and where I can be alone with them for many hours. These are windows of opportunities for bad things to happen. If I have this scenario and there is a person with bad intentions, or even a person with good intention but who lacks knowledge, who has not received training like the one we are receiving now, there is a space that is not safe, that is vulnerable. In sport in general, there is a culture of male hegemony. There are a lot of men in sport and in leadership position that involve power. The world is still very sexist, and gender inequality between men and women is very high. This has consequences and makes it difficult for girls and women to talk about violence they suffer. Once, a time ago, acting as safeguarding officer, I received a report of sexual violence at a club. And when I spoke to the girls and teenagers who made the report, I asked them if they had had the opportunity to talk to someone at the club who could help them. And they all replied, yes. Yes, we spoke to the club coordinator. But what the athletes heard from the coordinator was that, oh, it was nothing, that boys do that. Boys say and do that kind of jokes. Therefore, is pretty complicated when we do not have a diverse environment with numerical equality between men and women, so that there is a better understanding and necessary support. Involvement of the coach in the athlete's personal life. The involvement is so great that coach becomes the most important person in the life of the athlete in their family for a period of time. This creates a culture of trust and loyalty. And that is why it is often difficult to say no to a coach, or to think that they might do something wrong or bad to the athletes. Another characteristic of sport is the selection process. Selection is part of sport, is an inherent part of it. And throughout their life, these young athletes will go through several selection processes. At first, while at school, they aspire to join a junior team, then move to youth categories, later to senior level, and eventually to the national team. And this is an eternal process in sport. And within this selection process, if they are not objective and transparent, there may be opportunity for blackmail. That is, if you do me this sexual favor, I'll put you on the team. If you don't tell anyone, if you undergo this type of training, you will be on the national team, and so on. And what about the discipline? Discipline is more than necessary. Without it, no work can be accomplished. So the athletes must know how to eat, the importance of sleep, injury prevention activities, and study. It is a necessary routine of discipline. However, it is often confused with a culture of total obedience that brings with it a tradition of not questioning authority, and in this way can silence victims and normalize harmful practices. So this is the unique environment of sport, and if it is not well structured and organized, it can open doors to various negative situations, various situations that harm people, and that is a sad reality. And it's happened in our daily lives. We see dozens and dozens of complaints. Let's look at some data on incident of violence. According to the International Olympic Committee, harassment and abuse occurs in all sport in all levels of competition. Therefore, is not true that harassment or abuse occurs more in one sport than another, or that violence occurs in more in grassroots categories than in the high performance ones. In fact, violence occurs in all sports and at all levels of athletics development. The IOC also states that 1 in 3 women has experienced physical or sexual violence in their lifetime, and 1 in 6 men has experienced sexual assault or abuse in their lifetime. This is another study conducted in Belgium and the Netherlands, and more than 4,000 athletes were asked if they had suffered violence as a minor, with episodes of violence experienced in sport arena. This study showed that in relation to psychological violence, more than 900 athletes suffered violence in the sport environment. 75 athletes suffered physical violence. 174 suffered sexual violence, and 600 athletes suffered cumulative violence, which is when a person is the victim of more than one forms of aggression. This refers to multiple violence, for example, psychological violence and sexual violence, or physical violence and psychological violence, or all 3 forms of violence together. These are very high figures. 44%, almost half of the athletes suffered at least one type of violence in the sport environment. Now, let's talk a little about the types of violence and their manifestations in a sport environment. In accordance with the World Health Organization, violence is the intentional use of force or power that either results in or has a high likelihood of resulting in injury, death, psychological harm, maldevelopment, or deprivation. In our conference, we are addressing interpersonal violence, which occurs between individuals, and this violence can be psychological or emotional, physical, sexual, and neglect. So let's now look at the concept of each of these types of violence and how they manifest themselves in the sport environment. Psychological violence is any verbal or nonverbal behavior that causes emotional harm, fear, humiliation, anxiety, or low self-esteem in the athletes. Now, how does psychological violence manifests itself in the sport environment? This occurs when there are corrections delivered through shouting, especially in public, which belittle the athletes in front of teammates, for example, or when someone uses other athletes as a negative example. Um, for example, when a coach says, "Hey guys, look at Maria's movement. Did you see how she does it? Maria, please do it again. Great, great." Guys, this is a good example of a terrible execution. Psychological violence, another example is hitting at negative consequences without stating them directly. For example, there are many athletes who would love to have your spot on this team. It may sound motivational, but it implicitly threatens the athlete's position. The implication creates fear and pressure. Punitive silence, ignoring the athletes as a form of punishment or manipulation. Discrediting female referees, professionals, and athletes based on gender, experience, or appearance. So these are some examples of psychological violence that can occur in a sport environment. Between 50 and 75% of athletes are affected by psychological violence throughout their sporting careers. Psychological violence is the basis of all other forms of violence. It is the gateway to another, more serious forms of violence. This is the most common form of violence in sport and paradoxically the least recognized. And why? The answer is because this form of violence is considered a cultural normality. They are justified as a sport requirement. So it has to be this way. Does it make sense? Physical violence includes actions that may cause physical harm, such as touching, slapping, pulling, pushing, beating, kicking, biting. And in the field of sports, how can it be presented? When you ignore physical complaints, considering them exaggerations or a lack of commitment from the athlete, or when there are forced physical activity as a form of retaliation. For example, the athletes made many mistakes in training and now, as a consequence, has to do twice the planned physical preparation. Or a forced consumption of alcohol, drugs, or forced doping practice by subjecting athletes to training loads that are inappropriate for their age and ability, or by pressuring athletes to train and compete with untreated injuries. So this is a very controversial point, isn't it? Where is the line between what is acceptable and healthy and what can be characterized as a violence? For sure, it's difficult. There is no easy answer. This is a report that was published in the United Kingdom on the eve of the London Olympic Games in 2012. The BBC Sport Investigations revealed that elite athletes were systematically pressured to compete while injured, causing them permanent damage. So the doctor who was involved in this report said, patients who come to me and say their coaches have urged them to continue despite complaints of pain. Kids are told if they wanted to make it big, they need to put up with the aches, pain, and niggling injuries. So when does pain cease to be a sport effort and become a violence? And in fact, this is a million-dollar question, and we have to think about it. When you think about protecting athletes and other people, you are also thinking about you. You're thinking about your own protection. So let me tell you about a case. There was a coach who finished training his athletes at 8 p.m. He said goodbye to the athletes and went to his office to reveal the next day's training and finish some administrative tasks. When he was done, he headed to the parking lot to get his car and leave. It was around 8 p.m. when one of his athletes came looking for him and told him that his mother had not yet arrived at the club and asked him to give him a ride since they lived together, or since they lived close to each other. The coach's immediate response was yes, of course. Why wouldn't he help him? He was his athlete, and it was too late for him to stay alone at the club waiting for his mother. However, upon further reflection, the coach thought, it's 10 p.m. I'll be alone in my car with a minor, and his mother doesn't even know I'm taking him home. I don't think it's very safe for me, and I don't want to risk anyone misinterpreting the situation. So he returned to his office and contacted the athlete's family to understand the situation and ask permission before taking him home. So, by choosing to protect himself, the coach also protected the underage athletes, as it would not be good for him to be alone at such a late hour with an adult, even if it was his coach. So, do you see how everyone wins when you choose the safest path? Sexual violence is an unwanted or non-consensual sexual behavior or activity. There are some differences in the definition of sexual violence that may vary from country to country. But in more general terms, we can classify sexual violence into two types: sexual harassment and sexual abuse. About sexual harassment, let me present some key elements of it. So the objective of the sexual harassment is to coerce in order to obtain a sexual advantage. It is a crime typically found in the workplace or institutional settings. There is a power or a hierarchical relationship, and it does not require physical contact. In the field of sport, sexual harassment can occur when a coach suggests or offers sporting benefits in exchange for sexual favors, intimate closeness. For example, when a coach says, if you do me this sexual favor, I'll call you up for the national team, or if you don't tell anyone about this, I'll give you more playing time in the next match. Or when a manager who sends messages with sexual connotations to a subordinate employee, or sexualized comments, observations, remarks about the body, appearance, or personal life of a sexual nature. Sexual abuse occurs when an aggressor uses force, makes threats, or take advantage of the victim to engage in unwanted or non-consensual sexual activities. So, intimate touching, kissing, caressing, or manipulation of body for sexual purposes, exposure to sexual content, sexual intercourse, asking a child to expose themselves. In the field of sport, sexual abuse can occur when inappropriate physical contact happens under the pretext of correcting a technique involving unnecessary or unconsented intimate touching. So the contact or correction must be technical, justified, brief, and transparent without sexual intent. The coach, the doctor, or physiotherapist should warn about the touch and explain its proposed beforehand. Neglect. Failing to act when we should also constitute a form of violence because what we fail to do also matters. So neglect is the harm caused by the failure to act on the part of the person responsible for someone or a situation. And the impact occurs when the physical or emotional level. In the field of sport, neglect is when you use unmaintained equipment, training on courts or in gyms with damaged floors, when there are an excessive number of athletes for a single coach, when signs of psychological distress are ignored, imposing training loads without adequate recovery. So let's see this case. This was a real case in which 10 youth soccer players aged between 14 and 16 died in a fire in the dormitory of the training center of one of Brazil's most important soccer clubs. These young athletes lived at the training center, and the fire was caused by a short circuit in their air conditioning system in the early hours of the morning while they were sleeping. The club had already received almost 30 fines for operating without license. Furthermore, the club had previously been warned about serious flaws in the electrical system. As a result, 10 lives were lost. It was a tragedy for everyone. Can you imagine the impact it had on parents and families, the professionals who worked with these young athletes, and the club? And the question is, could it have been prevented? Of course, yeah. Well, so far, guys, we have discussed the context and the particularities of sport and identified key risk factors for violence, such as high competitiveness, lack of governance, selection process, and male hegemony. Then we look at the 4 types of violence: psychological, physical, sexual, and neglect, and how they may appear in training, competition, and sport management. So now let's move on and talk about the impact of violence. Violence does not end when the episode ends. The impact of non-accidental violence in sport are diverse, profound, and long-lasting. And there are impacts of certain types of violence experienced that will never heal. the person will only learn to cope with it, to live with the trauma caused by the violence. The impacts are felt by the athletes, the technical team, the community or organization. So the impact is felt by the person who has been victim of violence, as well as by everyone around them, due to the mechanism of empathy, which allow us to feel the emotions of others. I don't know if you remember the case of American artistic gymnastic, in which American Federation's doctor, Larry Nassar, raped hundreds of athletes. And one of those athletes who suffered this extreme violence told her father about it at the time. However, her father did not believe her at the time. He told his daughter that she had actually undergone a medical procedures, and that Nassar was a well-known doctor, and that many gymnasts has already undergone this treatment. But sometime later, when allegations from other athletes emerged and the entire investigation and prosecution process took place, his father, seeing everything that had happened, felt terrible pain and shock. He felt guilty for not believing his daughter. He felt great pain for what she had suffered, and then he committed suicide. Therefore, you can see that the impact falls on the victim and the people around her. Therefore, psychological, physical, sexual, and neglect violence will have repercussions on both the victim, the athletes, and the sport organizations. On the victim, the impacts can be physical, so the victim may suffer from illness or injuries. For example, an athlete who started to show up with a lot of bruises. Athletes may experience loss of performance, eating disorders, or sexual transmitted infections. Cognitively and emotionally, symptoms of low self-esteem, mood swing, and post-traumatic stress may appear. Behaviorally, they may be more prone to give up. The athletes may also be more prone to cheating, being more acceptable and vulnerable to doping and competing manipulation. In terms of mental health, the victim may experience anxiety, depression, suicidal tendencies. There are repercussions on relationship with behaviors such as social exclusion, marginalization, and avoidance of people and places. There may also be financial consequences, as the victim may also require psychological support, legal assistance, and other service, all of each involve financial costs. Sorry. It is important to understand the impact of violence in order to recognize the seriousness of the issue and to provide appropriate support to victims. There is, however, another important aspect. By being aware of these signs and symptoms, we are better able to identify cases that have not yet been reported or disclosed. By observing these changes in behavior, you can make yourself available, talk to that athlete or victim, and try to understand what is going on and how to help. And at the institutional level, are there repercussions? Of course. Damage to reputation, loss of players and fans, loss of sponsors, reduction in medal wins, reduction in public confidence, among others. Now that we have a better understanding of the impact of violence, let's talk about how to prevent it. So violence prevention begins with the sport organizations. A sport organization with a structured safety area will have at least 4 pillars. The first pillar is about the guiding documents such as code of conduct, policies, procedures, and all other documents that can guide the company's decision making, can guide behavior from all people who are involved with the sport organization. The second pillar is related to the educational actions. This includes all the safeguarding training programs with courses, lectures, and workshops for athletes, coaches, team officials, and sport managers. Everybody needs to know the roles, what behavior is expected, and which misconduct are not tolerated in that sport organization. The third pillar refers to the reporting channel, which will be responsible for acting in the investigation process and holding those responsible accountable. And the final pillar is about support and remediation, which will provide all the support for victims. It is therefore an institutional design that aims to create a safety structure. These are the responsibility of a sport organization. But here we are talking to managers, coaches, team officials, referees, athletes. Therefore, you as an individual, how should you act or intervene in your day-to-day work? So how to be an agent for safe sport? Safe environments are intentionally built. It is not by chance that one organization is safer than another. Safety requires intentionality. Respectful communication. For sport professionals, respectful communication is a foundational element of safe and ethical practice. Respectful communication is a fundamental start point. And in order to communicate with respect, we need to be well. We are very important and have a significant impact on sport development and on people's lives. Therefore, you carry responsibility, and to fulfill it, you also need to take care of yourself. Sport professionals are highly demanding professionals. They must stay up to date and have a strong knowledge of management, sport, and technical aspects. They are responsible for large groups of people, staff, and athletes, while also facing pressure for results from clubs, pressure from athletes' family, and from themselves. At the same time, they must balance these demands with family life, personal life, having loads, weekend training session, and travel for competitions. Under this level of pressure, even the best professionals can make mistakes. That is why self-care is important. If we accumulate irritability, distress, and anxiety, we may end up transferring this pressure to the more vulnerable side of the relationship, in this case, the athletes. Therefore, respect communication must be connected to well-being, mental health, and life balance. Boundaries. Sport professionals need to understand what they do and what they do not do, the scope of their role and responsibilities. For example, a coach should not provide medical diagnosis or prescribe diets if they are not qualified to do so, as this may have consequences for both the professional and the athletes. Respecting professional boundaries also means relying on multidisciplinary team, seeking support from other professionals, trusting their uh, trusting their experience, expertise, and working collaboratively. Policies. What are my organization's policies, protocols, and code of conduct? I needed to know them in order to comply with them, and also to expect the same from others. Intervention. Intervening in appropriate behavior requires goodwill and courage. I'm not just referring to formal complaints, but before situations escalate, there are many opportunities to intervene, especially in the early stages of minor psychological violence. Often, situations are not severe at the beginning. There is usually a gradual progression before something more serious develops. Violence frequently starts steadily with psychological aggression, a raised voice, or a humiliation. If you, as a sport manager, coach, or referee, are able to intervene early, speaking to the person and addressing what has happened, you give them the opportunity to reflect and adjust their behavior. So the goal is to stop harmful conduct at the outset through dialogue, patience, and by educational approach. This is how we build a culture of tolerance and respect. Does it make sense? Because this lies with your sphere of influence and action. Your role carries significant power as managers, coaches, team officials, and referees. Well, friends, we are coming to the end of the conference, and in these last few slides, I would like to point out that safe sport is a requirement of a good governance. So when you decide to practice safe sport, know that you have full support. You are not alone. Major institutions have already declared this in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. This is also in the IOC Olympic Charter, in the International Canoe Federation's Code of Conduct, and also in its safeguarding policy, which states that the ICF strongly condemns harassment and abuse in all forms at any times. So being safe in sports means contributing to a more ethical, healthy, and peaceful society. Being safe in sport means protecting athletes and everyone involved in sport from any types of violence and its harmful short, medium, and long-term impacts. It is about damage of reputation, loss of participants and fans, loss of sponsorships, reduction in the number of medals. And it is about complying with governing bodies and institutions. And my key message is safe sport is a series of small steps that together make a big difference for athletes, member, and sport organizations. Protecting people not only helps prevent violence against them, but also contribute to improving sport for future generations. And safety in sport is everyone's responsibility. So thank you very much for your attention, and I'm entirely at your disposal. Therefore, I'm leaving my contact information here to answer any question you may have. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Soraya, for this very important topic presentation and also bringing tool. I just remind everybody following the webinar that you can put your question in the chat and we will read for you. Also, you are welcome to switch on your camera because we have a screen with whoever switch on the camera. So we're happy to be connected to you. I see Susan from US smiling, also Deepshika from India, and of course, our honorary president, Pachi, still here following us. So a lot of camera turning on. So thank you for following. We do have some questions on the chat, and I see a lot of people taking notes here. So we will start with the chat. So Soraya, a question for you from Lai Xiao Xiao. Sorry if I pronounce it not perfectly. Dear Professor Soraya, thank you for this valuable presentation. I would like to ask, how can athletes feel safe speaking up when they experience unfair treatment, discrimination, or abuse?
Oh, this is a very important question. For sure, the athletes is the heart of the Olympic movement, is the most important stakeholder in the sport. And I believe the athletes will feel safe to tell about an allegation or a question about safeguarding when we have a safe environment, when the sport organization is structured itself with different kinds of structure, and especially when you have a report channel that is confident, transparent, and you have you are sure that your words will deal with respect, and that organization will deal with it with the seriousness required. So I believe athletes should speak and should try to find someone who the athletes trust. I think this is the best way to disclose some allegation.
Thank you very much. Our next question is from Dr. Jen Gibson, which is the chair of our medical committee in ICF. So she said, thank you so much for this excellent presentation. Could you tell us whether the rate of psychological abuse is the same for boys as girls?
The rate of psychological abuse in many studies, all the violence is the rate is more for girls and women than for boys, especially because we still live in a life who we have gender inequality. So girls and women are more vulnerable for this kind of violence, especially psychological violence.
Thank you very much. I think there was a lot of note taken here. Maybe one of the people here in this room want to ask a question.
Okay, so thank you, Michelle. I take this opportunity. Soraya, first of all, thank you very much for what you have taught us today, for sharing these concepts, so important. And you touch a very interesting point, which is that the organization has to make changes if they are needed, or have to basically regulate to be able to address these cases professionally. So what is important also for us here is to comment that the matters will not be resolved only if the ICF take care of that, but these need to be replicated. These good practices of good governance, establishing a policy and a system of report should be replicated by our continental associations, by our national federations, and of course at the club level. How do you feel about that? What's your recommendation on that regard? How we move forward with that?
Perfect, Cecilia. This is a very important, especially because safeguarding is no only one responsibilities, is responsibility for everybody. Everybody has to do with safeguarding from individual perspective and from the organization perspective. And I studied a little the safeguarding structure of the ICF before this meeting. And I was very happy that the ICF has a code of conduct, a policy for safeguarding, and this is a very important start point. And of course, it can go through all the sport organization associated with the ISF. And I think the ISF, it's like a start point that will give some information and inspire other sport organization associated with the ISF. So the next step is that each sport organization has its own code of conduct, its own safeguarding policies and report channel. So all the system will be saved in general.
Thank you very much. We still have around 5 minutes for the question and answer, and I see already 3 questions. So we'll do these 3 questions and then go for the break. So the next question is from Mrs. Lucy Gangloff. That said, thank you for your presentation. What can or should the sport organization do in order to protect the athletes, but also, the question disappears, sorry. What can the sport organization do in order to protect the athletes, but also whistleblower who speak up? And the second question from the same attendee, how can the IOC or ICF help protect them, including from their own sport organization, when the violence appear to be systemic?
Okay, for the first, well, the sport organization should structure itself in the safeguarding perspective. It's very important to have at least 4 pillars in order to instruct. The sport organization should have all the guidance document, that is the code of conduct, policies, procedures, flows, in order to everybody knows what to do, what is acceptable and not acceptable. And this is the first pillar for safeguarding structure. The second is the education. We need to educate. We need to have training programs, just like this we are having now. Everybody needs to know the rules. Everybody needs to know who should I reach out if I have some question or an allegation. The third pillar is about the report channel. This is a very important step in this structure, in this framework. We needed to have a very confident and well-structured reporting channel in order to receive this allegation, in order to do all the investigation process, and then to account those responsible. And the third and the fourth pillar is about the remediation. So to give all the support to the victim, since the medical support, the legal support, so to try to remediate this kind of situation, this bad situation. The second question, could you repeat, please?
Yes, just give me 2 seconds. The second question is, how can the ICF help protect them, including from their own sport organization, when the violence appears to be systemic?
Yes, perfect. When the violence appears to be systemic, usually it's because we don't have a very well structured in terms of safeguarding. It's because some behavior are deal with like are normalized behavior. You know, when you see some violence, oh, this is part of the sport. Oh, this is the way sport runs. So systematic violence, it has to do with the governance. It has to do when you have hierarchical power unbalance, when you have some part with a lot of power and other with less power. It has to do when you have non-accidental violence inside the sport environment, and it has to do when you have a silence mechanism. So when you have a fear to report a violence, when you have a not trust system, you make this silence present in the sport organization. So the best way to deal with systemic violence is to start from the beginning, to review all the system and try to fill the gaps. Where is the gap? And the most important, safeguarding is a journey. It's not possible to instruct the sport organization at once. We will not able to do it because it's a very complex theme. So this journey, it's about the sport organization needs to start with a point. Oh, if the start point, it's about the guiding documents, let's start with it. If the start point is to the education activities with lectures, with training programs, so let's start with it. And after that, we can structure the sport organization step by step, because this is a long journey until all the sport organization be structured and can deal in a good way with safeguarding.
Thank you very much. I was reading a question. I think it was around the same question of Ms. Bilkis Mir. So I'm going to skip this question. It was also about how can independence grievance mechanism can be strengthened for athletes to be safe. But I think you did answer more or less this question. One comment is not question before going to the next question. One comment is from Susan from US. She wanted to mention that she think pointing out the effect of neglect is so important because it's also about more than just compliance. It feels like a great way to explain to local clubs the importance of safeguarding everyone. So that's a comment on the chat. Then we go to the next question from Dr. Deepshika Beniwal. Dear Professor, thank you for the presentation today. Specifically, what do you consider to be the key tool or strategy for an organization to guarantee a safe working environment for its staff?
Yes, this is a very good question. And as I said, safeguarding is a journey, and you need to start from one point. And if I could choose one point, would be the guidance document. I think this is, in my opinion, is the most important start point to have a very good code of conduct and a very good safeguarding policy, because after that, I will be able to have a plan to put safeguard in place. So sometimes the sport organization don't have all the knowledge or all the resource to achieve it. So this is there's no much cost to develop this kind of documents, and it will impact a lot the sport organization.
Thank you very much. We still have a few minutes and one question on the chat, so I'm going to continue. Question from Kim Houston. Thank you for the presentation. What happens if there is a perception that the policies and procedure don't work? How do we build confidence in our processes?
Wow, this is very complex. Very, very complex. It's a difficult question. If you have this feeling, I think the dialogue is one of the most important act to do. Maybe you could identify some trusted person in the sport organization in the high level of hierarchical level, and try to talk with this person in a very clear way. I think it's tell your opinion about this, and not in many times people, if you have a case of it, if you don't trust about the policy and the procedures, people just follow their life and don't deal with it. But it's very important to deal with it, to intervene, to talk with people and try to change this reality.
Thank you very much. And I think we're going to finish with the last question from Cecilia here.
Thank you. Soraya, how the sport organization can come back, can return from a very serious matter that affect their reputation in terms of safeguarding. So we have here tremendous cases. You mentioned the one of Larry Nassar, for example, and we all know how much it damaged the reputation of the organization, even the NOC, etc., etc. So if that happens, it's not just the people involved, which is extremely important, particularly what you say, the athletes at the heart of the Olympic movement. They are the reason for us to be here. But the organization must continue. How we stand up again after a case with such a level of impact?
Yes, you have to have courage. You start from the scratch and to be honest and say, oh, I'm going to start it again in a right way, and I'm going to have people with knowledge, people with expertise around me to help me to restructure my sport organization. So I think this is the first and important step, to recognize that I have to restart. And I know, and to know that there are a lot of good people, a lot of good professionals who can help. The IOC has already a specific safe sport unity with a lot of resources and knowledge to help them to do it. So I think this is the most important thing to do.
Thank you very much, Soraya, and thank you for being with us today. I hope that all the audience may have taken due note about your advices, and we learn a lot from you. I'm really grateful for your participation at this second ICF webinar. Thank you, and Michel?
I think we're going to have a 15, we're right on time, unbelievable. We're going to have a 15-minute break. So please just stay here. We will put on mute, we'll switch off the camera, and in exactly 15 minutes, we come back for a second session more on women's perspective, when Claudia from Mexico will have a presentation, and then followed by a panel here. So please stay here. We come back in exactly 15 minutes. Thank you very much.